All right, so April, right. For those of us who live and breathe gardening, it's like this amazing invitation, like, hey, get out there, start digging.
It is, absolutely. But I got to say, walking into a garden center this time of year, it's kind of like, whoa, sensory overload, right?
Totally. I mean, seeds, starter plants, tools.
Mm.
Where do you even begin? It's that they expect you to have a PhD in botany just to choose some tomatoes.
And that's where we come in, right? We've done the deep dive for you, sifting through guides, talking to local growers, all that good stuff. And one resource that really stood out was What to Plant in April, your organic and sustainable gardening guide. It's from Petit Garden Paradise, and it's seriously packed with practical advice.
It really is. And in this deep dive, we're going to break down those key insights, especially for folks who want a thriving organic garden, but, without turning their lives upside down.
Exactly. We're talking cool season crops that kind of laugh in the face of April's, let's say, unpredictable weather. Then we'll move on to how to get a head start on those summer veggies, tomatoes, peppers, all that deliciousness. And of course, we can't forget about the sustainable practices that make your garden a happy place for both you and, well, the planet.
So if you're ready to get your hands dirty, but in a smart, eco-friendly way, stick with us.
Oh.
All right, let's jump right in. So this guide kicks things off with what they call April's frost-tolerant stars, which, I gotta admit, sounds pretty epic.
It does, doesn't it? And it's a good reminder that you don't need, like, blazing sunshine to get your garden going. In fact, there are some real superstars that prefer cooler temperatures, even a touch of frost.
Yeah, it's surprising how many of those, like, classic your root vegetables and leafy greens actually do better in the cooler months.
They do. And you can get those seeds right into the ground now. Carrots, for instance. The guy specifically recommends the Nantes variety, which is supposed to be great, especially if you've got sandy soil.
Okay, Nantes carrots, noted. And what about beets?
Beets,
Yeah.
absolutely. You got to try the Cusia variety. They have these amazing red and white rings inside, like candy stripes.
Mm,
Honestly, they're almost too pretty to eat.
almost. But seriously, beets are so versatile. Roasting, pickling, salads, and then, of course, there's radishes. I mean, talk about instant gratification in the garden, right?
Right. The guide says you could harvest radishes in about 30 days, so that's pretty cool.
It is. Super fast.
Uh,
And speaking of quick wins, let's talk leafy greens. Spinach, kale, Swiss chard, they're all fantastic this time of year.
they are. And the guide has some specific recommendations there, too. For spinach, they like Bloomsdale. It's got these really nice crinkled leaves. And for kale, Winterbore is the one to go for,
Right.
especially if you're worried about those late frosts.
Winterbore kale. All
Yes.
right. And Swiss chard, any favorites there?
Oh, yeah. You got to try Bright Lights. It has these stunning rainbow-colored stalks. Makes your garden look amazing.
So we've got our seeds. Now what? Just chuck them in the ground and hope for the best?
Not quite. Soil prep is key. The guide really emphasizes that. They mention this tip from 10th Acre Farm, mixing compost into your beds. That's like the gold standard for giving those seedlings what they need.
Compost. Got it. And what about frost? We can still get some chilly nights in April, right?
We can. So the guide suggests using old milk jugs as little mini greenhouses, just to give those plants a bit of extra protection.
Milk jugs.
Yeah.
Clever. It's amazing how resourceful gardeners can be.
It is. And one thing I love about this guide is it doesn't just tell you what to plant. It gives you this handy little table with all the key info, like how long till you can harvest, how much cold they can handle.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So looking at this table, carrots take about 50 to 80 days to be ready, and they can tolerate temperatures down to -6 degrees C, which is about 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's pretty impressive. And spinach.
Spinach, even faster, 30 to 45 days, and they can handle temperatures as low as -9 degrees C or 15 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, tough little guys.
They are. And then those radishes we were talking about, under a month till harvest, and they're good down to -4 degrees C, 25 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that's practically bulletproof.
Right. April might be a little unpredictable, but these crops can handle it.
Okay, so we've covered root veggies and leafy greens. What's next on our April planting list?
Well, let's move on to the brassicas and alliums.
Okay, now you're just using fancy words to show off. What does that even mean?
Fair enough. Brassicas are things like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and alliums are your onions, garlic, leeks, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. I know those. So why are those good for April?
Well, they're super nutritious, for starters, and they tend to be pretty good at fighting off pests. which is a big plus if you're going organic, right?
Yeah, that's a huge bonus. Less work for us and better for the environment. So any specific varieties you'd recommend for these?
Absolutely. For broccoli,
Uh-huh.
Calabrese is a great choice. It gives you those big, beautiful heads.
Calabrese.
Yeah.
Got it. What about cabbage?
Cabbage. Red Express is a good one. It matures pretty quickly, which is always nice. And if you're new to growing cauliflower, Snowball is considered a good beginner variety.
Okay, so broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. What about the alliums?
For onions, if you're planning on storing them, onion sets like Stuttgarter are a good bet. And garlic. Now's the perfect time to plant those cloves so you can harvest them in the summer.
Garlic. And what was that last one? Leeks.
Leeks, yes.
Mm.
King Richard is a good variety. It's got a nice mild flavor.
Okay, so lots of great options there. And this guide, it's not just about, plant this, plant that. It actually gives you some pretty smart organic gardening tips.
It does, like crop rotation. That's super important, especially for the brassicas. If you plant them in the same spot year after year, you're just asking for trouble with soil-borne diseases.
That makes sense. Kind of like how we need to eat a variety of foods to stay healthy, right? The soil needs variety too.
Exactly. And I love this little anecdote in the guide. They were talking about using marigolds as companion plants. Apparently, they planted some marigolds around their broccoli, and guess what? No holes from cabbage moths.
No kidding. See, those are the kind of real life tips that make a difference. Like, okay, someone actually tried this and it worked.
Right. It makes you feel way more confident about trying it yourself.
It does. And this guide, it's got this super helpful brassica cheat sheet. It tells you which ones you should start indoors, like the broccoli we talked about. Then it says kale can go straight into the ground in April, and for garlic, fall or early spring is best.
That's so handy.
It is. And it even mentions some common pests, like cabbage worms on broccoli and aphids on kale, so you know what to watch out for.
Being aware is half the battle, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got our cool season crops covered, but I gotta say, I'm already dreaming of summer flavors. You know, those juicy tomatoes, fresh peppers.
I hear ya. And guess what? April is actually the perfect time to start those warm season crops indoors. Gives them a nice head start so they're ready to go when the weather warms up for real.
So we're not just planting for now, we're already thinking ahead to summer. Love that. So what should we be starting indoors right now?
Well, for tomatoes, if you're into making sauces, San Marzano is a classic.
Yeah, Marzano. Okay, I actually know that one. What about something a little sweeter? For snacking.
Oh, Sun Gold is amazing for that. Little bite-sized, super sweet. And if you want something a bit more unique, try Black Crim. It's an heirloom variety with a really deep, rich flavor.
Heirloom sounds fancy. Okay, so tomatoes are taken care of. What about peppers?
For peppers, shishitos are fantastic. You can just toss them in a pan or on the grill. Easy and delicious. Then there's California Wonder, your classic bell pepper. And for folks who like things spicy, habanero will definitely bring the heat.
Habanero. I'll leave those for you. I'm more of a mild kind of guy. What about cucumbers and zucchini? You know those summer squash superstars?
Right. The guide suggests costata romanesco zucchini. It's like it's really cool ridges. And lemon cucumbers are great for salads. They're nice and crisp. And of course, there's butternut squash. Perfect for those cozy fall soups.
Okay, my mouth is already watering. Now, starting these indoors, that's got to be a bit more involved than just chucking seeds in the ground, right?
It is. You need to think about things like pots, light. But it's not rocket science either. This guide makes it super simple. Like, they recommend using biodegradable pots, like those made from cow manure or even newspaper.
Biodegradable pots. Okay, that makes sense. Less waste, right?
Exactly, and they actually say torn roots equal sad plants.
Yeah.
So these biodegradable pots, you can just plant the whole thing in the ground later. No need to disturb those delicate roots.
Smart. What about light? I mean, we don't all have fancy grow lights, right?
Right. But you don't need anything crazy. The guy has this cool tip about repurposing old bookshelves. You just add some LED strip lights, and boom, instant grow station.
Love it. Resourceful and affordable. Okay, so we've got our pots, our DIY grow lights. Anything else we need to know?
Well, remember those nematodes we talked about, those pesky little worms that can attack your plants?
Yeah, those guys. Not a fan.
Well, apparently marigolds are like kryptonite to nematodes. The guide suggests planting them near your tomatoes to keep those pests away.
Marigolds, the superhero of the garden. I love how these sustainable practices are just woven into every aspect of gardening.
Me too. It
What?
makes the whole process feel so much more holistic,
Mm.
like you're working with nature, not against it.
Totally. And this guide, it even has this warm season cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Tells you how long it takes for those seeds to germinate, when to transplant them outside after the last frost, and of course it suggests a favorite variety for each crop.
It's like having a personal gardening coach right there with you.
It is. Okay, so we've covered cool season crops, warm season crops. What else do we need to talk about?
Well, we can't forget about herbs and flowers. They're not just pretty faces, you know. They play a vital role in a healthy organic garden.
Right, they attract pollinators, deter pests, and they just make the garden smell and look amazing.
Exactly. So let's start with the pollinator-friendly herbs. Cilantro is a great one to plant in April.
Cilantro, love it. But I always have trouble with it bolting, going to seed too quickly.
I hear you. The guide actually addresses that. They recommend gently crushing the seeds before you plant them. Apparently, that helps speed up germination. And they suggest the slow bolt variety, which, as you might guess, is slower to bolt.
Slow bolt cilantro. Okay, that's going on my list. What other herbs should we be planting?
Dill is another excellent choice. Not only is it great for cooking, but it also attracts swallowtail butterflies.
Butterflies in the garden. Who doesn't love that?
Right. And chamomile is another good one. You can make tea with it, and it attracts hoverflies, which are beneficial insects that eat aphids.
So it's good for us. And it helps control pests. Win-win. Any specific tips for growing these herbs?
For cilantro, succession planting is key. Sowing a small batch every few weeks so you have a continuous supply. And planting dill near your tomatoes is a good idea, as it can help deter those pesky tomato hornworms.
Smart. So we're using dill to protect our tomatoes. Love it. What about chamomile?
Chamomile is pretty low maintenance. Just make sure it gets enough sun. And for basil, don't be afraid to let some of it flower. The bees will thank you for it, and you can even save the seeds for next year.
So it's like a little gift for the bees and a gift for yourself later on.
Exactly. And, this guide, it has this awesome herb cheat sheet that breaks down everything you need to know about cilantro, dill, chamomile. It even gives you some cool kitchen hacks like freezing cilantro in oil cubes so you can just pop them out whenever you need it.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've covered herbs. What about flowers? I mean, they're not just for looks, right?
Right. Edible and ornamental flowers can be real workhorses in the garden.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of flowers are we talking about?
Well, nasturtiums are fantastic. They've got these bright, cheerful flowers, and the leaves are peppery and delicious in salads. Plus, they attract aphids, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing because it keeps those aphids away from your other plants.
Ah, so they're like a sacrificial lamb protecting the rest of the garden.
Exactly. The Empress of India variety is particularly stunning, with these deep red flowers.
Okay, nasturtiums are going on the list. What else?
Sunflowers, of course. Mammoth is a classic. It gives you those huge edible seeds. And Tithonia is another good one. It's a magnet for butterflies.
Sunflowers and butterflies. My garden is going to be the most cheerful place on earth.
Right. And then there's calendula. It's got these beautiful orange and yellow flowers. And it's also super useful. You can use the petals to make salves for your skin, and it helps deter tomato hornworms.
Wait, so it's beautiful, good for your skin, and protects your tomatoes. Calendula is officially my new best friend.
Right. Multitasking flowers.
Totally. Any tips for getting the most out of these flowers?
Well, planting marigolds near your squash can help keep those pesky nematodes away. And for calendula, you can actually use the petals in soups. It adds a nice color and a slightly peppery flavor. The guide calls it poor man's saffron.
Poor man's saffron. I like it. Sounds delicious.
It is. And don't forget about saving those sunflower seeds. You can roast them for a snack or save them to plant next year.
Always a fan of free snacks and free seeds. This guide, it really covers all the bases.
It does. And it even has this handy flower power table that gives you a quick overview of each flower. Bloom times, bonus uses, tips. It's all there.
Amazing. Okay, so we've talked about what to plant. Now let's talk about how to plant, and specifically how to do it sustainably. I mean, that's what organic gardening is all about, right?
Absolutely. It's about being good stewards of the land, minimizing our impact, and creating a garden that's truly in harmony with nature. And this guide outlines 5 key sustainable practices that are really easy to implement.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's hear those 5 practices.
The first one is all about feeding your soil, not just your plants. And the best way to do that, compost.
Compost, yep, that's the gold standard, right?
It is, and it's so much easier than people think. The guide even shows you how to make a simple 3-bin composting system using pallets. You know those wooden things you see at garden centers?
Yeah, no pallets.
So you can basically build your own composting system for free.
Yeah.
And then you just toss in your kitchen scraps, yard waste, all that stuff that would normally end up in the landfill. It's like magic.
It is pretty magical how it all breaks down into this rich, dark soil.
It is. And then there's worm castings. Have you ever used those?
Worm castings, I've heard of them. They're supposed to be amazing, right?
They are. It's like super concentrated plant food. The guide actually calls it black gold. And they give you a link to 10th Acre Farm, which has instructions on how to build your own worm bin.
Worm bin. Huh. I might have to check that out. Okay, so compost, worm castings, any other ways to feed the soil?
Yeah, you can also plant cover crops. Things like clover. They help add nitrogen to the soil and suppress weeds.
So it's like a natural fertilizer and weed control all in one.
Exactly. Okay, so that's the first practice, feeding your soil. The second one is all about using water wisely.
Water. Yeah, that's a precious resource we can't take for granted, especially these days.
Right, and you don't need to install a fancy irrigation system or anything like that. Simple things can make a big difference, like using drip irrigation instead of sprinklers.
Drip irrigation, I've heard that's more efficient.
It is. The guide says it can save you up to 50% on your water usage. And they actually built their own drip irrigation system using recycled hoses.
So again, it's about being resourceful and saving money. I like it.
Me too. And mulch. Don't forget about mulch. It's like a blanket for your soil, keeping it cool and moist.
Mulch. Yeah, I always forget about mulch. What kind of mulch is best?
You can use straw, leaves, grass clippings, pretty much anything that will decompose and add nutrients to the soil.
Okay, I'll make a note to stock up on mulch. Anything else about water?
Oh, one more thing. Watering in the morning is best. That way the water has a chance to soak in before the sun evaporates it.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've covered feeding the soil and watering wisely. What's the third sustainable practice?
Saving seeds.
Oh, yeah, I love saving seeds. It's like this little act of rebellion against the big seed companies.
It is, and it's so satisfying to plant seeds that you collected yourself. Plus, it helps preserve those heirloom varieties, which are becoming increasingly rare.
Right. And heirloom varieties, they just have so much more flavor, don't they?
They do, and they're often better adapted to local conditions. The guide recommends starting with easy-to-save plants like lettuce, beans, and tomatoes.
Okay, good to know. And what about seed swaps? I've heard about those.
Seed swaps are awesome. It's a great way to meet other gardeners and share seeds. The guide actually got some Cherokee purple tomato seeds from a seed swap.
Cherokee purple.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing.
It is. It's an heirloom variety with these beautiful, dark purple fruits. Okay, I need to find a seed swap near me. This is too cool.
Right. Okay, so that was seed saving and swapping. The fourth sustainable practice is companion planting, which we've already touched on a bit.
Right, like planting marigolds with tomatoes to keep those nematodes away.
Exactly. But there's so many other great combinations, like planting basil with tomatoes. It's supposed to repel flies and even improve the flavor of the tomatoes.
So it's good for the plants and good for our taste buds.
Exactly. And carrots and onions are another classic pairing. They help deter each other's pests, and sunflowers can act as natural trellises for cucumbers.
Wow, it's amazing how these plants have evolved to work together. It's like nature's teamwork.
It is. And the guide even mentioned some research from the RHS, which showed that marigolds can actually reduce root knot nematodes by up to 70%.
70%, that's huge. Okay, I'm officially sold on companion planting. What's the fifth and final sustainable practice?
It's all about getting creative with zero-waste hacks. Using things you already have around the house to solve gardening problems.
Okay, I love that. Give me some examples.
Well, you can use eggshells as little seed starting pots. Then you just plant the whole thing in the ground later.
So cute. And no plastic waste.
Exactly. You can also use cardboard as a weed barrier under your mulch. It helps suppress those pesky weeds, and the earthworms love it because it breaks down and adds organic matter to the soil.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
Right. And then there's this awesome DIY pest spray recipe. You just mix garlic, chili powder, and water, and boom, natural pest control.
Garlic and chili powder. Those aphids won't know what hit them.
Right. It's a much gentler approach than using harsh chemicals.
I love it. Okay, so those are the 5 sustainable practices. Feed your soil, water wisely, save seeds, companion plant, and get creative with zero-waste hacks. It's amazing how much we can do to make our gardens more eco-friendly without sacrificing beauty or productivity.
It really is. It's about shifting our mindset, seeing our gardens as part of a larger ecosystem and working in harmony with nature.
I completely agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive into April planting, I just want to say I'm feeling super inspired. It's amazing how much we can grow, even in these early spring months.
Right. And we've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore.
There is. But for now, Let's just recap the key takeaways. We talked about those awesome cool season crops that thrive in April's cooler temperatures, like spinach and radishes. We covered how to get a head start on those summer favorites like tomatoes and peppers by starting them indoors. And we explored a whole bunch of sustainable practices that can make your garden a happy place for you and the planet.
And remember, gardening is a journey. It's not about perfection. It's about getting out there, getting your hands dirty, and enjoying the process.
So true. And for you, our listener, I encourage you to think about which of these April superstars you might want to try in your own garden and which sustainable practice speaks to you. Maybe it's finally starting that compost pile or checking out a seed swap in your community.
Or maybe it's just taking a few minutes to appreciate the incredible ecosystem that's right outside your door.
Beautifully said. And remember, every organic choice you make, no matter how small, makes a difference. So get out there and get growing. And if you want to revisit any of the tips we talked about today, be sure to check out that What to Plant in April guide from Petit Garden Paradise. It's a fantastic resource. Happy gardening, everyone.